Hey folks, my name is Robin and this is Only the Best Fantasy Novels. Welcome back, and today I want to talk about Elantris, the next book up in my attempt to reread the entire Cosmere before the release of Wind and Truth. So, Elantris is an interesting book because not only is it Brandon Sanderson's debut, but there's actually a fair amount of fans out there who will tell you that they consider this to be Brandon Sanderson's best work. It's his first, it's the one he spent the most time, energy, dedication, whatever it was, the most focus on. Since then, he's been churning out books of variable output, but this one is pretty stellar. And now that I've reread it, after having read it like well over a decade ago, um, and I'm a very different person. I'm a very different reader, and I look for a lot more in my fiction now than I did before. I can see why it's the Elantris has this particular place within Brandon Sanderson's canon of Cosmere novels. It's a good book. It really is a good book. Um, it's one of his most character-driven and compelling novels. Like, this is a book all about political intrigue and back and forth. Like, the magic in this book literally appears in right at the very end to wrap up the story. That's when magic actually enters the chat in this book. Basically, it's similar to Warbreaker in that aspect. I think in Warbreaker, like the final climactic battle that usually wraps up an epic fantasy book, it happens off screen in Warbreaker. So like these books are unique in that they're very character driven. Um, they're very intrigue focused, politically driven novels. But yeah, what is Elantris about? So, Elantris is a story of three particular characters. The first is Rauden, who is the crown prince of Ireland. It's this kingdom just on the outskirts of Elantris, the fallen city of the gods. Rauden wakes up one morning to find himself becoming a member of the dead. And in this world, when you become a member of the dead, you're thrown into the pits of Elantris. So that's pretty much what happens to Rauden. And in there, he starts to uncover, he starts to delve into the mystery in an attempt to make the life of those around him better. He starts to delve deeper and deeper into the mystery of Elantris and what caused this city of the gods to fall a decade ago. Um, so that's the first major POV. The second is Princess Serene, the princess of Theod. She arrives to she arrives by ship to marry Rowden, only to find out that he died a few days ago, and she is legally now a widow. um, so yeah, almost immediately she becomes wrapped up in this story, in this conflict against the high priest visiting the kingdom of Ireland, Rathin, or however you pronounce that. Um, whose job who's come to Ireland in an attempt to convert um, the populace to his religion. Why she immediately gets into conflict with him? Because this religion is very militaristic, and they've essentially taken over the entire continent, consuming kingdom after kingdom. And Ireland and her native kingdom of Theod are the two remaining, are the last two remaining bastions of another sect of the religion of yeah. So it's basically a whole religious conflict between her and the Kjorn, and then the final POV is Brathen himself, where we find out about this gear he's under to essentially convert the entire populace of Ireland in 3 months, or the kingdom will suffer the consequences. Um, and it's a deadline that, as he works more and more frantically to try and convert the populace, he begins to question the the way his religion operates, and their beliefs and these kind of thing. And so essentially we have a priest undergoing a crisis of faith. Um, so three extremely interesting storylines. Um, in Serene we have the traditional high political fantasy playing out, but then with the priest we have this religious crisis of faith going on, and then we have Rowden, who delves into the mystery, the more fantastical elements of this world. So those are three main POVs, and they're three very compelling POVs, and they honestly, when you start reading this book, it just flows. Like the characters are all brilliant. They're all unique. They're well conceptualized. There's no there's no mistaking anyone for another person in here. Like they all have their unique traits and quirks. There's no the, I can't think of any that I can't identify as unique. Essentially, it is truly probably the most carefully written of all Brandon Sanderson novels, given the fact that this was his first published novel, and one that really and truly put him on the map as a very as a fantasy author to watch, even if at the time Elantris wasn't exactly received with widespread acclaim. In terms of the larger Cosmere, there's not much tie-in that happens in this book. Like, we do see some things, but we don't, at the time, we don't have anywhere near enough knowledge to understand what we're seeing. We do have Hyde make an appearance, as he inevitably does in pretty much everything Cosmere related. And there is a part towards the end of the story where we meet, we see something that has major Cosmere implications, but once again, we don't have any context to it. And it's a perpendicularity, basically. So there's that. Like, and you can see the foundation of Sanderson's magic system that governs the entire Cosmere in here, as the story unfolds. Not just that, you can see like I wouldn't even bother talking about that. Like, it's all, you don't need to know any of this stuff to enjoy this book. Like, this Elantris was written as a standalone. Obviously, there are sequels planned, and there are threads left at the end of the story that can absolutely lead into other stories. So the door is left open for more, and I can see the threads that he can pick up if he so chooses. But Elantris is you can first and foremost read this as a standalone. You don't need to know or care anything about the Cosmere as a whole. If you're familiar with the Cosmere, you'll certainly extract more value from the book. Not very much, depending on the edition that you have. Because one of my pet peeves at Sanderson is that he has this tendency to repackage his fiction and just put a little twist on it and essentially compel his fans to buy the same thing over and over. And Elantris is a good example of this. Like, for the 10th anniversary, he released a new edition of the book that has like additional stuff in it. Now, depending on how big a fan you are, you may or may not want to read that additional fiction. It may force you to go buy back the book and all of that. Like, it's one of the things I like less about him. But obviously, the guy is a businessman. It makes sense for business. But anyway, tangent. There's a whole lot of tangent. Back on track with this book. One thing I noticed in Warbreaker, and that this book kind of drilled home to me, is that like the societies of these worlds, they come to embody the values of the shards that inhabit the worlds. For example, we know there are 2 shards on this world, and you can see the way one of them is embodied in the spirit of Elantris, and you can see the way the other one is embodied in where it comes to the Fjordell Empire, and just their approach. And in addition to that, like, it's directly referenced in a way at one point in terms of what's driving the Fjordell Empire and why they are the way they are. It's, when I say directly reference, it doesn't mention like a shard, but it does mention something related to the shard. If you're a Cosmere fan, you'll know. Anyway, but like I said, at the end of the day, this is really just a really good political fantasy, very character driven, with great characters. It was fun to read. Serene is the standout character of this book for me. She's just such a joy to read. She's entertaining. She truly is. And like I said, it's very standalone. If you know about the Cosmere, you will extract more value out of this book. If you don't, you really don't need to. If you want to get a taste of Sanderson's work, I think I would actually recommend starting with this as one of the starting places. I know everyone says, "Oh, Miss Bourne, you need to read Miss Bourne," but if you don't want to commit to a trilogy, if you want to read one book and find out if Sanderson is for you, this is a really good one to pick up. One of the few I think I think if I had to recommend a single Sanderson book for you, for a potential reader to read and figure out if they're for him, I would recommend either Elantris, Warbreaker, or Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Um, those are three of his best standalones in my book. If you're willing to undergo a trilogy, then Miss Bourne is definitely where you want to start. But yeah, that's my contribution to the hundreds of thousands of Elantris and Brandon Sanderson videos that float around on YouTube. I'll as I continue to read my way through the Cosmere on the way towards With the Truth, I'll continue to post these videos. Mainly, I don't know if anyone will actually watch these or so, but I mainly just want to vent my thoughts on these books. Anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Elantris. Great book, fun read. I enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than I did the first time I read it, and that's mainly because I've matured quite a bit as a fantasy reader, and I look for much. I'm more willing to appreciate books for what they do than try to project what I want from a book out of them. So yeah, if you made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.